It's Monday, March 15th, and today, hundreds and thousands of women across Australia are marching. They're marching for justice. Because this year, we feel like justice isn't being served. And so the March for Justice protesters are calling on the federal parliament with several different demands, calling on them to independently investigate allegations of rape and sexual assault, and to also push for 50-50 gender split in the federal parliament. And so I thought it was important today that today's Teaching Heroes episode is a special episode where we're going to talk about a big issue. And today's big issue is feminism. And I have an extraordinary teacher with me today to talk about feminism and what that means for us as teachers in the classroom. So welcome, Bronwyn Ilott. Thank you for joining me on today's big issue.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you.
So today's conversation actually started on International Women's Day when Bronwyn, who's a long-time family friend of mine, I feel like saying cousin, and I know you're not my cousin, and you and Michael aren't like Michael's Bronwyn's husband, not my cousin, but it's been like such a big part of, you both have been such a big part of my upbringing, so I feel like calling you cousin.
Yeah.
But Bronwyn sent me a message on International Women's Day, and what Bronwyn did for me was really articulated what I was feeling that day. What prompted you, Bronwyn, to send me that message?
I think I spent International Women's Day really grappling with the theme Choose to Challenge, and I am a big advocate for International Women's Day. I teach in an all-girls school. I'm the mother of 2 girls. I'm a strong feminist, and so for me, the day is always a day that I feel like there is community spotlight on women and women's issues, and I want to champion that. But I really struggled with the theme, which was Choose to Challenge. And I grappled with it for a long time, and then I got to the end of the day and I wanted to post something, but I actually didn't know what I wanted to say because I couldn't find the right words. And I guess my struggle, and I know that I've spoken to a lot of people since then about different interpretations of the theme, and often it's been about celebrating the women who stand up and speak out, and I certainly want to do that. But I guess the wording of the theme, Choose to Challenge, didn't sit well with me because I kind of was thinking about, first of all, why do we have to choose? And then why do we have to challenge? And I was getting frustrated at kind of an acceptance that there's behaviour that we see all around us that will only, people will only be made accountable for if we choose to challenge it. And I wasn't feeling good about that. And so I think, I reached out to you and conversation then started.
Yeah, and I didn't even realise actually until you sent me that message that I was feeling a bit of a grief on that day, because, and I'm a big social media person, and I always, same as you, always post something, rah, aren't women great kind of message, and all I could do was post a picture of me, my mum and my daughter that says let your light shine, because I was the same. I was like, what are we challenging? I'm sick of challenging, I'm tired.
Yeah.
What do we say anymore? I've said it all. What does challenge mean? So it was a really beautiful exchange actually, and was a great celebration in a way for women and the power of the conversations and sharing our experiences with each other.
Absolutely. And I think I reflected onto the previous year's theme, which was generation equality. And I felt like we'd actually gone backwards. Like I kind of felt like last year we were celebrating something that I was so proud to say, yes, I see that in my girls. I see that in my students. This is the generation where equality will just be the norm. And then this year we're choosing to challenge. So I don't know, I maybe overthought it, I don't know, but it didn't sit well with me. And it's something that I've sort of taken to my classroom since then, had some conversations with some of the girls at school and amongst my colleagues and friends as well. So I'm still working on it, really.
Yes, so so many questions for what you just said, but let's let the listeners know who you are. So tell me about yourself. How long have you been teaching for? Where do you teach now, and what's your role in the school?
Yep. So I've been teaching for 20 plus years. Not dissimilarly to you, I grew up in southwestern suburbs of Sydney, and I went to a co-ed high school in southwestern Sydney, and then graduated from there and went on to Sydney University to study a Masters of Education, and just absolutely loved the idea that I would be able to teach the subjects that I loved. So my major was history, and English was my minor. And I obviously at that point just felt like, while I'd always loved learning, I felt like I was really ignited for my passion for learning, and particularly teaching during that time. And then finished my degree, and reflecting on the conversation that you had on the podcast last week, kind of went into all of my pracs thinking about, what does this mean? How could this work for me? And I was really, really fortunate that the final year prac that I did was at a school that offered me a position. So I remember actually chatting to my partner about it, and he sort of said to me, think of it as a 6-week job interview, like you're about to go into a 6-week job interview. And I was like, yep, I am. And so every opportunity that I could to be involved in the school and to take, special opportunities, I sort of took those, and as I said, was rewarded really with the offer of a job, not even going for an interview. So I felt like that transition from uni to school was ridiculously easy in lots of ways compared to so many people now and the struggle that they're undertaking. So I was incredibly fortunate to get a position very easily, and I say that, having said that though, I obviously put heaps of work into my pracs and really did treat it very seriously. And so yeah, I spent a few years teaching there. That was also in southwestern Sydney, and then travelled overseas and taught in London for a year. I was just doing supply teaching in London, but managed to get sort of a long-term supply teaching position at a school in Brixton, which was so interesting. And so I loved that, and then returned back to the school that I had taken some leave from, and then was kind of looking around for opportunities. I'd been, given opportunities to do house coordinating and public speaking and debating, and I'd taken all of those because I was, keen to look at ways of stretching myself professionally, I think, and those opportunities were there, and it was great to sort of practice leadership. And I was young, like, 4 years out of graduating. So I did take those opportunities, but I guess I didn't really find my passion in those opportunities. I enjoyed them, and I enjoyed the experience I got from them. I enjoyed the way my relationships with students changed as a consequence of those, and I was able to sort of enrich my teaching and learning through those opportunities. But hadn't really found the passion that I was sort of hoping for. And so I actually changed schools. I got to the end of being at the school for 6 years, and I saw the year 12s graduate that started when I started, and I thought, yep, this is time. Like, it's my first school. It's time for me to move on. And so I did, and then I moved into the Catholic system. That was the first Catholic school that I went into, and I just felt like things expanded in lots of ways. I felt like the culture of the school was very different, in a really positive way. There were new opportunities. It was very outward focused in terms of actually seeing the world with a different lens that really appealed to me. And so spent some time there, and then I moved on to another school in the inner west in Sydney, and spent quite a lot of time there. I think around about 10 years, managed to have 2 children through that time, and then sort of returned to work in a job share capacity, which was fabulous. So I was really fortunate and thankful that the school was able to provide that opportunity for me. And then we decided we'd like to move to Melbourne, and so I applied for a position at a school in Melbourne, which is where I now am. And I originally just applied for a position in the Learning Enhancement Department. It really suited me. So it was a part-time position. I'm English history trained, so I had literacy skills that I could kind of work with students with. And while I was sort of trying to settle our family into life down here, I thought that the demands of the job would actually work really beautifully with my family situation. And then in the time that I've been here, my role has evolved and my situation here has changed quite a lot. So I sort of went from the LSO role into classroom teaching in English, and then in RE as well. And now I am the head of our Justice Education program here at Siena. And I also oversee our learning centre here as well. So I'm still teaching RE. I've got 3 classes of RE. But my role is very much about sort of looking at some of the big issues in the world around us and thinking about how I can prepare our students for engagement with those issues, and how we as a school community can respond to those from a Catholic social teaching perspective, but also from a perspective that reflects the world that we're living in right now. And I also, as part of that role, organise immersions when COVID doesn't happen. We travel to South Africa once a year, and we also and we also have an immersion to Arnhem Land that's just kind of in a pause at the moment. So so that's basically how I got to be where I am.
It really just strikes me, listening to your role, and you're no Robinson Crusoe. There's other teachers in that, it's teaching can be so much more than just preparing those lesson plans in the classroom. There's so much scope for even you're talking about public speaking and those things you've done at the other schools, to be really part of this community, right? It's not just about teaching. It's never just about those lesson plans in the classroom, but a school community consists of the relationships between these, adults who are called teachers and these children who we call students, and what they create within a school community. And just sounds like what you're doing at this, head of justice, which is just fantastic. It's just incredible that the school gives you and the students that opportunity to just get messy. I can imagine just the conversations and the diversity of opinions around these massive issues that we grapple with. How exciting.
Absolutely. And I think too, so we obviously in Melbourne spent quite a lot of time in lockdown last year, and I feel like that sense of community was so much reinforced for us. Like that was what we were missing when we were away from our students. And while technology was fabulous in terms of there was continuity with our education, we still ran clubs at lunchtime. We still had SRC initiatives happening, and the students were phenomenal. But I think it was that sense of coming into a space and having that energy that you actually get in a classroom or in corridors or, in staff rooms. And I feel like we came back from that experience with such a renewed appreciation for what it is to be teachers, but also what special places schools actually are. And our girls very much feel that still. Like that's something that we don't take for granted anymore. We just had our swimming carnival the other day, and the girls were just so excited to be able to participate in those sorts of events again. So I very much feel like we are thankful and acutely aware of the fact that we, this year, fingers crossed so far, we're just going to experience the full life of the school in the way it's intended to be.
Yeah, just even at the university level, there's always such a push to put things online, but more students than what even I expected wanted to be in the classroom. So in New South Wales, when we came to the second semester, our students had a choice at ACU whether to come back to face-to-face or to stay online. And we just, a lot of students chose to come back face-to-face, and those who chose online regretted it, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Regretted it and went, I wish we had to come back face-to-face. But everyone's come back this year just, so excited to just be in the classroom, and everyone's so engaged. And there is something about people in a room together, I think, that is important. And and I think, going back to why we're meeting today, it just struck me as I was talking. I was like, that's why kind of protests and these marches are so important, because you can often feel like you're the only one feeling, you know, disenfranchised or feeling all these feelings, but it's not until you can kind of go to an event like today where you see, oh, everyone, you know, the commonality in the rage for today, you know, or the frustration is, you know, oh, it's not just me. And there is something about a kind of group of people coming together to say, hey, you know, we've got to do something here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, as human beings, as adults, we need that, but I think our students really need to see that too, because I think they're very much grappling with the challenges that they're a part of their world, climate change issues in relation to environmental justice, and then obviously issues relating to gender and feminism and the way in which people are being treated. And I think that it is very helpful for them to be in community with other people who share those same challenges and frustrations, so that they actually feel a sense of belonging to something bigger than, but also an acceptance of their own feelings and values too.
Yeah. So you were saying earlier that you had reached out to your students and started to talk to them about some of the feelings that you were feeling on International Women's Day. So what's their response? What do girls down in Melbourne think about all of this kerfuffle that's going on?
Well, it was a kerfuffle that so the kerfuffle was in my classroom when I actually said, so let's talk about it. Because first of all, it just started with, so what's the theme for International Women's Day? And we sort of sat with that for a minute, and then we all straight away, oh, yes, I remember what it is. And then I just said, I've got a problem with it. What do you think? What might my problem be? And then a few girls, it was really lovely, actually. I kind of just sat with them, and they were senior girls, and they sort of, a few went, and then we then just had this discussion, and then, you know, a few people, but it was a really fabulous discussion in that there was certainly some who were like, no, I didn't see it that way at all, still don't really see it that way. I actually see that it's very empowering. It's giving us the agency to actually stand up and speak. We're celebrating those who've done that, and that will then put a spotlight on them, and so will encourage others to do the same thing. So it was just a really rich discussion, but I guess we then took it down to a level of, you know, so do you choose to challenge? So we talked about situations that they might find themselves in if they go to, I had actually referred to a situation I'd found myself in on the weekend at church, actually, and one of the beautiful parishioners in our community, when he saw my daughter and I come up, I offered to help him. He was setting up the tea and coffee, and he said, oh, now the women are here, you can make it look a bit prettier. And I shared that with my class, and I said, I know this person is a beautiful human being, and I know that he is the product of a particular generation, and so because of that, I just smiled nicely. But then I actually talked about the struggle I had with that within myself, but also that happened in front of my 12-year-old daughter. And, you know, I let it go. I didn't challenge it, and I let it go. And I kind of have thought a lot about that, but then I've also reflected on some of the speakers I've heard in relation to International Women's Day, and they talk about the choose to challenge and when you would choose to challenge. And I guess that kind of affirmed me in that case that, you know, he meant no harm by it. It was a way of making conversation, but I let it go. And so, yeah, so then I talked about that with my girls in the classroom, and then we talked about, you know, so if you're out with some friends and there's a, you know, a group of your friends who actually say something that you're uncomfortable with, would you call it out? Would you actually say something? Would you let it go? Would you make a joke of it? Like, how would you respond? And it was such a rich conversation, and one of those teaching moments where you're like, yep, I'm not on script. I'm not actually following any curriculum really, but I'm so engaged with these young people, and they are so invested in this conversation. And it was, I don't know, just really lovely to hear the respect in the conversation that they have with each other, because there were a range of opinions, and that there was listening, there was reflection, there was, you know, discernment, and then there was polite disagreement in some cases, but also in other cases, affirmation of the way in which they'd respond. So many girls actually spoke about the differences in terms of ways people behave. Many of them championed their male friends who are from, you know, all boys schools around us, who actually would profess themselves to be feminists and would actually stand up and advocate for feminist issues. And then some of them said, well, I have a friend who's a misogynist. And then we all just went, well, is that a good friend? I don't know. Like, if you actually, if you come out with that statement and you know, and so we sort of talked about those sorts of things. So it's an interesting time for us to kind of check our own values, I guess, and to think about them as women of 2021, of mixed generations. You know, what does it actually mean when I'm in that situation? How do I respond? When the girls are in that situation, how do they respond? And where do we actually, I guess, make exception? Because I made an exception on that particular case, and they're all doing the same thing. So it was really, really interesting. And, you know, I walked out of there again just thinking, wow, how lucky are we as teachers that this is an opportunity that we have every day to have these conversations and to learn and to be moved by and inspired by these young people.
Yeah, and you really opened yourself up too, because I think that's such an important thing, and I personally think we need to do it more as teachers, is to expose a little bit about our uncertainty or how we are in the world. You know, we don't always have the answers. I'm not always as I appear. I'm not always strong. And to allow them that opportunity to see your vulnerability, because I think in our sharing as teachers and who we are, that allows them space to be who they are with you.
Absolutely.
So you can't expect, you know, students to have that sort of conversation with you if you're not willing to put your heart on the line too.
Yeah, and I think it definitely comes with time. So as a new teacher, I wouldn't have had the confidence to have those kind of discussions. I would have possibly thought it was, you know, not something I shouldn't deviate from the curriculum. I should just keep ploughing ahead. But I guess I just saw it as a golden opportunity. You know, these girls are in their final year of school. I'm acutely aware that when they leave a high school education, the kind of education that they will receive will be very different. You know, they're in a Catholic school at the moment. They're hearing, you know, the Catholic worldview and you know, being asked to frame things with that perspective. And so consequently, I sort of know that those moments and opportunities are just, you know, we don't have them for much longer. And so I kind of want them to be going out into the world and thinking about, okay, so, you know, when we have that discussion, how can I actually apply that now? Because that's when I think that's when the learning is rich, and that's when we've done a good job. If they can move out into the world and they're still reflecting on a conversation or an opportunity. Yeah,
and I think that brings me to something that I grapple with around a range of issues, and you know, this one in particular over the last couple of weeks with the call, you know, Chanel Contessa's petition that consent education be mandated across the curriculum in Australia. And so I did have a look at what is the current state of play around consent. And it's not mandatory, but every single state in Australia have a section of the curriculum that deals with consent, and a lot of it comes in the PDHPE syllabus around healthy relationships. So all schools would teach healthy relationships and what that looks like, and would teach that content. But whether they necessarily choose consent in terms of, you know, sexual relationships, I think would differ. And one of the things I grapple with is that there's already so much pressure on us as teachers to, you know, in so many areas, you know, maths and, you know, our literacy scores and math scores and bullying and all these calls to, you know, fix society's problems. Oh, I know what will fix it. If we teach it in schools, that's going to solve the problem. And every time I have this, because I've like got a 10, 6 and a 4-year-old, I just have this image of my poor little 6-year-old boy, you know, with the weight of the world on his hands, that if he's taught consent, the world's problems will be solved. And I think, well, how do we don't exist in a vacuum as teachers. We exist in a society that, you know, kids, there's, you know, I just can't see us teaching consent. I think we should teach consent, just, you know, officially, yes, I think we should. However, it can't just be on us as teachers. You know, if we're teaching it in the classroom and then they go home and they hear, you know, comments from their parents or their family friends, or they look at the news and they see, you know, someone who's even alleged, you know, a politician, there's been a serious allegation against him and nothing's being done, then what, you know, how can we really take that responsibility on as teachers if the rest of the world isn't also going to grapple with this, you know, issue as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think for us, like when I think about it, we sort of frame it in the idea of respectful relationships and what is just a respectful way of actually engaging in a relationship. And it was interesting, one of my colleagues was talking about a conversation had come up and one of her students said, you know what, it's just about human decency, right? And we were saying, yeah, it's actually, you know, again, in terms of having to teach these sorts of things, we're actually just teaching people to be respectful of each other, and we're teaching people to behave in a way that shows respect for other people. And so but I hear what you're saying, and I think that's where our challenge, but also our opportunities as teachers, in that things are happening around us that are real and that they are impacting on our students, and we can't ignore those things, and we need to help them navigate that. And part of me thinks, you know, while they're here with us at schools, that's something that we need to help them do. So when something terrible happens, when something frightening happens, when, you know, we're faced with a pandemic and there's a whole lot of uncertainty about how we're going to respond to that, we need to have those conversations with our kids so that they actually feel a sense of safety, but also the opportunity to actually, you know, help navigate through the situation with a perspective that they are comfortable with, coming from people that they respect. And I think that allows them to go home or even to walk out of the school gates and see what's going on and sort of have the confidence or the courage to actually engage with that outside of the school. So I think you're right. I think obviously, you know, once you put something on the curriculum, it makes it seem to be important. So I remember when Indigenous education,
that's
true. When we started to say, oh, no, we need to change the way we're talking about this. We actually need to put it in the curriculum, and suddenly that'll make everyone understand and see it as important. So I think in some ways that's a positive, because it actually encourages us to put a spotlight on something. But I think too, then sometimes there's a temptation just to run through and tick boxes and move through, whereas I guess as opportunities come up in the real world, that's an opportunity to really engage with an issue, and that's a teachable moment, because, you know, something happened on the bus on the way in, and let's have a conversation about that. How did you feel about it? What happened? How else could you have behaved? You know, those sorts of moments. So I don't know, I think that...
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, what are we, you know, in terms of the university context, one of the things I you know, we have, I think, contrary to what people think, we get told what to teach, right? So we don't have much flexibility there. But, you know, sometimes I wonder about, oh, now my thoughts are going everywhere. I don't know what I was going to say. There's so much. But I don't know. Like, oh, yeah, that's right. What is the, you know, the quality of, it's not about the quality of the teacher in my mind. I think, you know, it's about, well, has this individual teacher grappled with this issue themselves? So in terms of Indigenous education, it's a really great point, because you have teachers that embed First Nations teachings so beautifully and so well, and then you have teachers who do it incredibly badly. And it's the same with, you know, I like a big one for me at the moment really is about health, and you know, we're telling our children to eat, you know, really healthy things in the classroom, but then, you know, in the staff room we have, you know, cookies and cakes. And like, so, you know, do we need this kind of, partly I think needs to be some sort of transformation in the teacher themselves to grapple with these big issues, else they can't do what you're doing so beautifully in the classroom and having these rich conversations with their students. You know, if you as a teacher aren't quite sure where you sit, you know, and so that's a bit of my struggle too about mandating in the curriculum, because it can go the other way. You know, you can, if we there's got to be a kind of education around that as well. And I'm telling you, what we, you know, the university degree as it stands, there's no room within that either. So we as lecturers also grapple with time, and there's no opportunity with any of our, I mean, obviously we can carve it out. You know, obviously we have a responsibility to carve it out, but in terms of what our units are called, I mean, there's no room for a, you know, how you know, transform your life in this unit so that you can be a transformed teacher in the classroom.
I think for me, one of the roles that I'm working on at the moment, so we're just starting out our reconciliation action plan with Reconciliation Australia, and so that's a whole school process that has a series of actions that we're committing to it as part of our commitment to reconciliation. And we found, just in conversation with our team, so some of the students are on that team as well, and I guess coming from an English history and justice sort of background, understanding and speaking about, and I guess too, like I grew up when we talked about Australia was discovered by Captain Cook, and then we, you know, and that was a vivid memory of mine. And then I remember teaching about invasion and thinking, wow, we've come very far in terms of language. But I also I suddenly realised in talking to students that there are some staff who feel quite naturally comfortable talking about those issues because of their education in terms of what they're actually teaching, or because of their own areas of interest. And there are other staff who just don't have the language, the knowledge, the skills. And so we were really fortunate this year to start the year with some cultural competency training, and that kind of helped us all develop a language and an understanding that, and it was great because it was our whole school staff that were involved in it, our office staff, our maintenance staff, our teaching staff, our support staff. And so it just allowed us all to kind of enter it, you know, bring the knowledge you have, bring the understanding that you have, bring your questions, bring the things that make you feel uncomfortable, and let's kind of work through this, and let's develop an understanding together to create a culture here, so that it doesn't have to be something that's forced and awkward. It's actually just how we talk about things, and how we, you know, we navigate when situations come up, how are we going to actually address that, how are we going to talk about it as a community.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it really talks to the responsibility we need to take on ourselves really as teachers, and that it isn't kind of good enough, I don't think, anymore around, you know, particularly around First Nations, but also, you know, consent, lots of things, environment, all of it. It's not good enough anymore to say, oh, I don't know. You know, we do have to take some responsibility in educating, you know, continuing to update our own education and be engaged and grapple with these issues ourselves, so that we can be the extraordinary people that we are in the classroom with our students.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And again, I mean, I feel incredibly fortunate that the role that I do just encompasses all the things that I'm really passionate about. But I definitely think that, I mean, we are helping to form young people who are going to go out and contribute into our world. And, you know, they need to be knowledgeable, they need to have intelligent conversations, they need to make a contribution. And if we ourselves don't have that knowledge and skill, then we can't work with these people to help them develop it. So I think that, as well as, in addition to the responsibility of learning your subject and your content, and learning how to teach it, there also needs to be a sense of, you know, continual updating of what's going on in the world, so that you're actually an active citizen yourself, so that you can be people who can go in and quite organically have conversations with kids about real world issues. And have intelligent conversations.
Yeah, it's you know, just starting to really get present to, and there's another podcast coming up later this week where I talk to 2 public school teachers, and I know they're really embedded in their community. It's just so integral for us as teachers to and make sure we are engaged with the community beyond the school walls. Like, where is our school even situated? Who are the people out there? And to have our students be really present to that as well. You know, my students as my teachers and your students as children. You know, what is actually going on outside the school gates, and how can we engage with that critically as human beings? And it's not just about, you know, literacy, which is very important. We need to learn how to read and communicate. But yeah, I'm just so present with talking to you about the incredible opportunity we have as teachers.
Yeah.
And the discourse, I think, from education ministers and things are just so much about getting the scores right.
Yeah.
We're just missing this opportunity of really elevating the kinds of, you know, the kind of role that teachers could actually have in our community.
And I think, Jo, when you when I first read about your podcast and you were talking about, you know, educating humanity, and I just thought it just appeals so much to me, because that's what, like, that's the biggest privilege of the work that I do, is that, you know, yes, I'm helping develop skills and knowledge in terms of a curriculum, but for me, it's very much about, you know, who are the people going to be who leave this place, and what messages will they take with them, and what learning will remain with them. What kind of people are they going to be? And that really is at the heart of the work that I do. And that's what, you know, when I wake up in the morning, that's what I'm thinking about. You know, what opportunities exist today that we can actually, you know, make this something that is memorable and real and actually meaningful.
So, you know, you make that sound so easy in a way, and I don't think it is. I don't think it is, and that's another thing I think we need. And I'd love to hear about, what does it take for you, just as Bronwyn, you know, in the morning with your two gorgeous girls and your husband. How do you manage that yourself in your family to be able to get up and have that thought about your work? What does it take?
I think for me, that I have two children, it means the world to me that they see that I contribute something of benefit to the world that we live in. So I want them to be proud of me, and I want them to be proud of the work that I do, and I want them to develop an awareness through the work that I'm doing as well, about the world that we live in, and to have conversations that maybe they're not having at school, or whatever, for whatever reason, just to have before they're having them at school, we might have them at home as well. So I think for me, that very much inspires and motivates me, that I want them to see that I'm doing good work, because that matters to me, and that's where I get satisfaction and motivation from. But I also think, I feel like, and I guess it's been a progression in terms of my growth as a teacher, but very much when I started, I was, you know, very much concentrating on the lesson plan and on the content and on everything that was going to happen within the lessons. And obviously I have shifted in terms of the subjects that I'm teaching now. So when I was in Sydney, I was, you know, modern history and English and you know, at a senior level, and now I'm in RE classes, which obviously lends itself to the opportunity to have those kind of conversations that are in alignment with our school's values and mission, but also are reflective of the world that we're in. So I think as a teacher, my situation is even more unique in that I don't have necessarily the curriculum pressures and things. But having said that, you know, I think most of us are house group teachers or mentors or homeroom teachers. So there are opportunities in those days to have those conversations. I see that in the way that, you know, people move around the school, in the way that they engage with other people, in the support that they show for things that are going on. So whether or not it be the work that you're doing as such, there are opportunities through the way in which you yourself are navigating the world, but also how you're engaging with the students outside of your curriculum, that will allow you to show that, you know, you are supporting and interested in and you know, behind some of the bigger things that are going on in schools as well.
Yeah. And just lastly, I think I think let's talk about us then as women beyond our work, and how we ourselves are grappling with these issues, because it's been great actually, because my husband James is really starting to actually ask me about, because I wonder with the consent thing and the choose to challenge, right, is that I think when I was younger I challenged a lot and then got a reputation it's a bit feisty, and I've really pulled back the last couple of years, and I don't speak up anymore. And partly, I was saying to James, partly it just happens so often.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do I, if us women spoke up every time we were sexually harassed, like every little comment that's made, if it's to us or to others, we just wouldn't shut up, and partly it's and then I was saying that to James, and he goes, don't, and I said, oh, maybe I misread things, and he goes, don't be a victim, you don't have to let it slide. And I'm like, but it happens so often.
Yeah.
So I wonder, how do I feel like such a responsibility to, day to day to be, a woman who embraces femininity, and also my who I am, and then who also is someone that can transform the world. But then sometimes just tired.
Oh, I hear you. And I remember saying to you the other day, I'm just tired. And I feel like that. Like, I feel like circumstances and the current climate is really tiring, because you're right, you could be speaking up all the time and it feels like there's not a lot of traction. And so that is really hard, I think. And I think too, talking to our girls at school, that whole idea of being known to be the feisty one, or the whinger, or the person that you can't say anything in front of without feeling, and I get it.
You feel like people start shutting up around you because
and so I think that is the thing that is really hard, because you don't want to be that person, but also you don't want to live in a world where things are being said and done all the time and you don't actually have a reaction to it. So I don't know, I guess the choose to challenge keeps coming back and saying, okay, so maybe it is about choosing the right time and the right situation and the right set of circumstances and the right context, and actually having the conversation or thinking about the action that you can take. Because there are so many things that move me and that make me sad and that make me frustrated and that make me want to take action. But then, if you did that all the time, it would wear you down so much, I think. So I think it's about being mindful of the things that you can actually invest in. And I guess that's almost like sometimes there'll be times when you can let things go because you actually just don't have the energy to deal with it. And there'll be other times when you're like, you know what, no, this is too important or whatever, and you'll react in accordance to that. So I don't know, but it's hard. And I think that's, you don't want to be seen. But I also know, having conversations with staff who are at all boys schools, the challenge that the boys are feeling like they can't actually say anything. So, while we're feeling like, how do we respond and how will that be interpreted? Boys are struggling to find the language to actually react to things and to engage in conversation, because they're not wanting that to be misconstrued or misinterpreted. So I actually think we've got to be mindful of that. We've got to be mindful of the way in which, this is impacting on young men who have the very best intentions, who are trying to engage in conversations as well, who
absolutely.
Are being silenced because of that.
That's right. And boys' education has come such a long way. And actually, we had, me and my family, we would, my brothers and sisters and my nephews, we had a great conversation, similar issue to this. And we were all a little bit different, a little bit the same, and we all managed to kind of stay in the conversation with each other, which was great. And so our nephews were listening, and then at the end we said, so Sam, what do you think about all of this? And he was so great. He said, I thought this was just an issue for my generation. I didn't know that you also have this issue. And it was great for all of us to hear that and to say, yeah, we're all grappling with it. And I think if we can kind of stand in this place with each other, as you say, knowing that, you know, boys and men are working this out as well. And so are we as women. We're working out, okay, how do we say things? When do we say them?
Yeah. And
to just be very mindful that I think that I do see that there is more willingness to have difficult conversations here than there used to be. I do see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, again, it comes back to at the heart of it, we're talking about respect. And so if we can actually all engage in conversation that is respectful, to ensure that everyone is being treated with respect, then I think that those are the sorts of conversations that will see that kind of toxic culture that is being explored in relation to Parliament and those sorts of places. That will actually break that down eventually. But I think the other thing that, again, I struggle with, and I know my students do too, is that change doesn't happen instantly. Like, it's a long process. You know, and some of the changes that you put in place this year as a student leader, you're not going to see the end result of those. You're not going to necessarily see the, you know, what that product is going to be at the end. And I think that we all have to keep that in mind too. We have to reflect on the progress we've made, but also know that things are not going to change quickly. And
we're just part of that river, you know, of change through. So it's the Ides of March, Bronwyn, you know, and us as both Shakespeare.
Yes, indeed.
It's a day of reckoning and a day of settling debts and, you know, a day of change, you know, traditionally in the Roman calendar. So let's see.
I like the sound of that.
So it's just been such a great, I've really relished this opportunity. Thank you so much for grappling with me on this big issue, Bronwyn. You're just doing incredible things. I'm just so excited for your students that I can just imagine what your students are going to get up to in the world. So thank you so much for being the extraordinary person you are and joining me today on this podcast.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for creating this space and for all the phenomenal work that you are doing.
Thanks, Bronwyn. Catch you all next week. Bye.